Hey guys, tonight we're not following a noble general, a curious merchant, or even a regular soldier. Tonight you're someone else, someone Rome rarely talks about, someone always in the background, always at the edge of the forum, just outside the torchlight. You are the executioner, the final hand that carries out the sentence no one wants to hear, but everyone demands to see. You're not a magistrate. You don't debate laws or decide fates. You just enforce them. Your world is iron blood and silence. You're the end of the line, the one who makes justice visible. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your local time and location. In the comments, it's always oddly soothing to know who's lying in bed, thinking about ancient death at 2:41 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weren't born for this. No one is. You didn't dream of it. Didn't ask. It just happened. Maybe you were poor. Maybe you were a slave who earned favor. Maybe you were simply in the wrong place when someone asked, "Who's strong enough to hold the axe?" And you were. Now you live at the edge of the camp, or the outskirts of town, or beneath the amphitheater stairs where the crowd doesn't look. No one speaks to you unless they have to. People cross themselves when you pass, not religiously but instinctively, as if death might be contagious, because in a way it is. Your first job wasn't a full execution. It was a flogging. You remember it vividly. The condemned was a thief, or maybe just a hungry boy with bad timing. He was tied to a column, his back bared, his breathing shallow. The crowd came early, eating olives and laughing. A few bet on how long he'd scream. You were handed the flagrum, a Roman whip, with knotted ends, sometimes embedded with bits of bone or lead. 30 lashes, the centurion said, then walked away. No instruction, no warning, just do it. So you did. Your first swing was weak. You were nervous. You missed. The crowd booed. Someone threw a date pit. So you tried again, and this time you connected. You remember the sound more than the scream. A thick snap, like tearing parchment soaked in wine. By the 15th lash you stopped thinking. By the 30th, the boy had stopped moving, and the centurion just said, "Good," and tossed you a skin of wine that tasted like copper. Historians still argue whether Roman executioners were official state employees or just disposable labor. The truth, you don't even know. You were never given a title, just a task. Quirky tidbit. In some parts of the empire, executioners were required to wear hoods in public, not to hide their identity, but to shield others from the shame of looking at them. You don't wear one, not anymore. You want them to look. You've learned things since then, like how people beg differently, based on their class. Citizens use titles and lineage. Slaves use family names. Everyone thinks they're special in the face of the blade. Everyone thinks you'll care. You've also learned that public executions aren't really for justice. They're theater. The real punishment happens long before the first drop of blood. It happens when the crowd starts whispering your name. When children ask their parents, "Is that him?" When you hear someone say, "Better behave, or he'll come for you." You are not a man to them. You are a warning. Your home is small, sparse, straw mattress, a jar of oil for cleaning tools, a corner you've scratched tally marks into, though you stopped counting years ago. You eat alone. You sleep lightly. Sometimes they give you coin. Sometimes they give you bread. But most of the time they just give you a name, and you carry it to the block like a stone on your back. There's no ceremony, no priest, no final words, unless you allow them, which you sometimes do. Because even you still believe people deserve to say something before the end. The worst part isn't the work. It's the waiting, sitting alone with your own silence. The quiet between assignments when your hands aren't shaking and your blade is clean. That's when the memories come. That's when you start remembering the way some of them looked at you, not with fear, but with pity. And that's the part that stings, because you didn't ask for this. But here you are, the last face they'll ever see. And somehow that has to be enough. You clean your tools before dawn, always before dawn. Not just because the blood stains easier after sunup, but because the silence helps. No footsteps, no market noise. Just you, the grindstone and the slow, rhythmic sound of iron being sharpened against stone. It's the only sound that feels honest anymore. Your kid is laid out carefully. You're not sloppy. Sloppiness leads to cruelty. Not quicker death, just messier ones. You've got your knives short-curved, designed more for tendon than flesh. Your axe, heavy-headed, nicked along the blade like it remembers every neck it's met. And your hooks. You don't think about those unless you have to. But they're there, clean, hung on the wall, like instruments in a twisted orchestra. There's also the saw. You try not to use the saw. Quirky tidbit Roman executioners often had access to multiple tools, each suited for different punishments: beheading, flogging, crucifixion, mutilation. Efficiency was expected. So was silence. Today you've been summoned to the praetor's court. It's sentencing day. That means standing at the side of the magistrate's chair, just behind his left shoulder. You're not acknowledged. You're not introduced. You're just there, a shadow with a blade. And everyone knows what that means. The accused is dragged in bound, bruised, defiant. A thief, a deserter, a runaway slave. It doesn't matter. He's already been judged. The trial is a formality. The crowd came to see the face of guilt. And yours. You stand still, arms crossed, blade tucked into your sash. You've learned to breathe shallow in this room. Too many perfumes and too much fear. The smell sticks. The judge announces the sentence: death by strangulation, followed by display. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Strangulation means no spectacle. No arena, no blood. Just the quiet choke of a rope in the dark. You're handed the cord. It's black soft, reinforced with leather threading to prevent tearing. You've used it before. It doesn't squeak like some ropes. It hums a sound you feel in your forearms. Historians still argue whether Rome preferred public executions or quiet removals. The answer is both. Depending on the message they wanted to send, you don't get to ask questions. You only get the rope. You lead the condemned through the side corridor. The walls are damp, the air thick with candle soot. He spits at your feet. You don't flinch. You've seen spitting, crying, screaming. You've seen men collapse at the threshold and beg to be whipped instead. You've seen mothers whisper lullabies to themselves while walking to the post. This one walks silently until he doesn't. As you loop the cord, he says, "You don't have to do this." You reply, "Neither do you." It's not clever, but it's true. Then the work begins. You've learned that strangulation isn't just pulling until they're quiet. It's a process. If done wrong, it becomes a slow-motion horror show. If done right, it's still awful, but at least it's fast. You cross the rope behind the neck, one knee in the small of the back, your elbows high. You pull. He chokes, gurgles. His feet dance, your hands burn. 30 seconds. A minute. You feel the twitch, the final buckling. You wait longer, always wait longer. The worst mistake is stopping too soon. When it's done, you lean him gently against the wall. Not out of mercy, out of balance. It's easier to dress the body that way. Quirky fact, executioners in Rome were often responsible not just for the death, but the display. Whether it was a body hanging in the forum or a head on a pike, you were the decorator. You carry him out, wrapped in linen, not for his dignity, for yours. People stare less that way. You place the body upright in the iron cage near the east gate, visible but unreachable. A warning. A baker passes by and nods, not in greeting, in recognition. The kids don't come as close today. Maybe the magistrate's speech worked. Maybe your presence did. The body stays there for 3 days. You check it each morning, adjust the ropes, swat away crows, replace the missing finger if you can find it. By the end of the week, you're assigned a new task disposal. Not everyone gets buried. Some are burned. Some are dumped in the old quarry. Some are given to physicians for study, though you're not sure what can be learned from an exploded rib cage and a half-missing scalp. You get paid a bonus for clean removal. You do your job, because no one else will. At night you oil your blades, not because they're dirty, because they'll need to be perfect tomorrow. The crowd starts gathering before sunrise. By the time the fog lifts, there's a sea of tunics, merchants, beggars, children, perched on barrels, even a few soldiers off duty, each clutching a hunk of bread like they've come to a morning play. The forum is never quiet, but today it buzzes full of a particular energy you recognize instantly. It's execution day, public, which means this isn't just about death, it's about display. You're in place early, because you have to be. You're not just part of the show, you're the final act. And if you mess it up, no one forgets. The condemned is already there, chained to the execution post in the center of the square, stripped to the waist. His crimes are written on a wooden tablet nailed above his head, bold Latin lettering, announcing him as a traitor or a thief or an arsonist, depending on who's reading it and how much wine they've had. You glance at his face. Young, maybe 20, pale, breathing hard. His eyes keep flicking toward the crowd and back to you. You've seen that look before. The look that says, "Is this really happening?" It is. Quirky tidbit: Roman public executions were often held in high-traffic areas like forums, crossroads, or outside temples where the divine could witness and the public couldn't look away. Some were even scheduled to align with market days for maximum attendance. You step forward with your tool of choice today, the axe, not the dull chopping block from the arena. This one is yours. Weighted, balanced. You've cared for it like a craftsman cares for his chisel. It's not elegant, but it's efficient. When your hand wraps around the shaft, the crowd leans forward like a single breathing creature. And you don't begin yet, because timing matters. This isn't just death, it's justice, according to Rome. And justice must be paced. A herald steps forward and reads the sentence aloud, slow theatrical voice, booming off the stone buildings. The condemned doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stares forward, eyes flicking between defiance and collapse. You step behind him, check the bindings, tight. You place your hand on his shoulder, not out of comfort, just to gauge the angle. You feel him tremble. Then you lift the axe. There's no drumbeat, no countdown, just you, the blade. And one terrible moment where the world goes completely, utterly silent. Then it falls. Crack. A gasp from the crowd, a hiccup of motion, then stillness. You've learned not to check if it's done right away. You know, the weight of a clean strike, but the way the body folds, the speed of the blood. You take one step back, clean your blade with practice strokes, and wait as the magistrate confirms. "Justice has been served," he announces. Everyone nods. No one claps. And yet some cheer. Historians still argue whether executions were meant more for punishment or for spectacle. You've stopped caring, because the answer doesn't change what you just did. The head is placed in a wicker basket and handed to a messenger. Sometimes they go on pikes. Sometimes they go on walls. Sometimes, when the crime is particularly political, they go into sealed boxes to be delivered personally to provincial governors. You once saw a senator's face nailed to his own estate gate. Quirky fact: Roman laws forbade the execution of citizens without trial. But what constituted a trial was often loosely defined. If the emperor or senate declared you guilty, that was that. No lawyer, no appeal. Back at the platform, the cleanup begins. Not your job. You've already washed your hands. Already checked the blade for nicks. already felt that familiar echo of adrenaline wearing off too fast, leaving a hollow space behind. The crowd disperses slowly, buzzing satisfied. To them, it's a moral reset, a reminder of the law, a thrill with breakfast. To you, it's Tuesday. Back at your quarters, a younger assistant sharpens another axe under your supervision. He's too eager, tries to joke. You think they'll ever stop needing us. You look at him, then at your blade, then at the stack of names waiting on your table. You say, "Not as long as men lie, steal, or breathe." The assistant stops laughing. You sleep that night with your axe beneath your cot, not because you're afraid of others, but because you've learned sometimes the worst thing in the city is you. The iron is glowing red. You hold it over the coals, watching it shimmer, the tip quivering like it's alive. There's something ancient about this part, more ritual than punishment. Branding isn't about ending someone. It's about marking them forever. Today's task isn't an execution. It's a message. The man before you was caught stealing grain from a military granary. Not just petty theft, state theft. That makes it political. That makes it personal. And Rome doesn't forget when its granaries go missing. So now he's tied to a column in the center of the barracks yard, shirtless, eyes wild, sweat already pouring down his face, not from heat, but from the knowledge of what's coming. You approach slowly, carrying the iron on a flat wooden paddle. The brand itself is shaped like the Latin letter F, fur, for thief. It will never heal clean. Quirky tidbit, Roman branding was commonly used on slaves, deserters, and repeat offenders. Sometimes it denoted crimes. Other times it simply announced their status, fugitivus, runaway, or service slave. You've burned every one of those into someone's skin. As you stand in front of him, you hear it begging. At first it's low, muttered. Then he starts offering things, names, coins, favors. It always goes this way. You don't answer. There's nothing to discuss. Your job is clarity. The soldiers watching from the shade begin placing bets. Will he scream? Will he faint? Will he bite through his lip? You press the iron into his chest. Hiss. His scream slices through the morning like a trumpet. He twists against the rope. The smell of burning hair and flesh churns your stomach, but you don't flinch. You hold steady. Count to 5. Then pull away. The skin blisters instantly. Raised. Raw. The letter already recognizable. You step back and douse the brand in a bucket of wine. The soldiers cheer. Not for you, just for the performance. Historians still argue whether branding was seen as a punishment or a preventative. You know it's both. It doesn't stop thieves, it just warns everyone else. You hand the iron to your assistant. He handles it like it's cursed. Maybe it is. Because once you've burned your first mark, something changes. Not just in your target, but in you. After the branding, you're assigned follow-up duty. Escort the prisoner back to the work camp. He can walk, sort of. You give him a rag to hold against his chest. He doesn't thank you, but he takes it. Quirky fact, Roman brands were sometimes reheated and reapplied if the Mark didn't take well the first time. You've seen men pass out before the second press. You've seen others laugh through it. You never know which you'll get. That night you oil the brand, hang it on its hook. The wood handle is stained with hand sweat even though you clean it obsessively. You sit down to eat. Bread, olives, a piece of dried fish, and the taste is wrong. Everything tastes faintly of smoke. You leave your plate unfinished. Outside, someone is telling the story already. The executioner burned a letter into him so deep it'll show up in the afterlife. You roll your eyes. It wasn't deep. You've gone deeper. You return to your quarters. Wash your hands again. Even though the smell's gone, the feeling isn't. That slight twitch in your fingers, the pulse that lingers under your thumbnail, the muscle memory of heat and resistance. You lie down, eyes open. Sleep comes slowly, not because of guilt, but because you know there are more letters, and sooner or later, someone will need them burned. You can hear the whip long before you see it. That awful wet crack like leather slapping meat because it is. The sound travels down the stone corridors, bouncing off walls, echoing in places where even sunlight refuses to linger. Today you're not holding the whip. Today you're watching. For now. The prisoner is tied to a wooden scamnum, face down arms, stretched forward legs, shackled. He's already bleeding. The whipmaster on duty is new overzealous, using too much arm, too little technique. The lashes land heavy, too high, too low, inefficient. You're called in to fix it. Because flogging, like everything else here, must be precise. You take the whip from the boy's trembling hands. It's a flagrum, Roman military issue, 3 leather thongs tipped with bits of metal. You inspect the knots. Blood and dust cling to them like dried honey. Then you step forward. You don't speak. You never do. You raise your arm and bring it down clean. Crack. Not a scream. Not yet. Just a grunt. You know where to hit. The shoulders. The back. The base of the spine. Never too high it glances off. Never too low it tears too fast. This is about suffering, not destruction. That's the Roman way. Quirky tidbit, Roman floggings could be administered as punishment or prelude, a setup for crucifixion or execution. Sometimes it was the only sentence. Other times, just a warning, you've done both. The prisoner's skin begins to lace open red lines across brown muscle. He pants. His eyes roll. At lash 10 he begs. At lash 15 he goes quiet. You know the rhythm. He's in the space between pain and collapse. That's where Rome wants him. You pause, not out of mercy, but calculation. Then you finish. 25 lashes. Exactly. Not a single one more. Because going over would be illegal, and going under would be soft. Historians still argue how many lashes a body could endure before permanent damage. You've seen a man survive 80. You've also seen one die at 7. It depends less on muscle and more on will and whether Rome has decided you still need it. You drop the whip. The assistant rushes in with vinegar water. He dabs the wounds gently. You taught him to do that, not because it heals faster, but because the stinging slows the body from slipping into shock. Rome needs its prisoners alive, just long enough to learn. You step away, wipe your hands on a rag that's been red for years. The magistrate gives a nod. The crowd, smaller today, disperses. They'd seen better floggings. They'll be back for crucifixions. On your way out, someone stops you. A scribe holding a tablet. There's a name, he says. Another sentence. You take it without reading, because you already know how it ends. You head back to your tool shed where the flagrum gets cleaned again and hung back on its hook. It doesn't hang straight anymore. The leather's warped, the knot's stiff. It remembers too much. So do you. Quirky fact. In some provinces flogged, criminals were forced to wear placards describing their crimes. You've helped tie them around necks before tossing them into the street. At dinner, no one sits near you. They rarely do. There's a man who's seen you work. He thinks you enjoy it. He's wrong. You don't feel pleasure. You feel nothing. And that's what frightens him. Not your whip, not the scars, but the fact that you go home, eat lentils, wash your hands, and sleep like the gods don't notice. Make it quick. That's what the magistrate says. He says it with a wave of the hand as though you're brushing crumbs off a table, not about to carve open a man's throat. The condemned is kneeling in the execution pen, eyes closed, mouth moving without sound, praying, maybe, or counting. You've learned not to ask. His crime. Insulting a senator's wife in public, loudly, while drunk. The senator wanted a public beheading, but the governor overruled it. Too messy, too much attention. So now the sentence is private execution, and you're the solution. You're used to this. The jobs no one wants, the ones they whisper about. Mercy executions, which really just means no screaming where the nobles can hear. You unsheathe your pugio, a short Roman dagger, not for stabbing, not for slashing, for cutting cleanly, precisely, and without spectacle. You sharpened it yourself this morning, polished the hilt, balanced the grip. The trick is getting under the jaw and through the windpipe before the body jerks. It's not artistry, it's geometry. You step behind him. He doesn't turn. He just says, "Please." You don't answer. Because you can't. Because if you do, if you speak, then this becomes personal. And you can't afford that. Not again. Quirky tidbit: Roman executions were sometimes offered as a form of dignified exit for disgraced citizens, especially elites. Rather than trial and shame, they were allowed a quick death, often in private, sometimes with their own hand, sometimes with yours. You place one hand on his shoulder, then draw the blade. The angle is right, the pressure precise, the breath stops fast. No gurgle, no scream, just a sudden absence, like a candle that forgot to flicker before it went out. You lower the body gently, lay it on the stones, and wipe the blade with your tunic hem. Someone will clean the rest. You're only here for the end. Historians still argue whether Roman executioners were taught restraint or simply learned it over time. You don't remember being taught, but you remember your first mistake, a botched strike, too shallow, too late. The man flailed for 5 minutes. His family watched. You don't let that happen anymore. You report back to the scribe. He nods, makes a note, asks if you need new linen. You say no. You say nothing else. But you do wash your hands 3 times, then soak the blade in wine, then sit alone in your quarters until the room stops spinning. At sunset, you're called again. Another name, another whispered sentence. This one's different. A woman, high-born, accused of poisoning her husband. The court wants her banished, but the family wants her gone. You're told to offer her the dagger. It's an old tradition, noble suicide guided by the state. You carry the blade in a velvet cloth. When you hand it to her, she looks at you, not with fear, but with recognition. She's seen your work before. She holds the dagger, weighs it, then says, "Will you stay?" You nod. Not because of honor, because of clarity, because Rome wants it clean. She does it quickly, better than most. You close her eyes, then collect the blade. You return to your quarters, hang up the cloth, clean your hands again, and sit in silence. Because mercy, in Rome, it always has a body count. You smell the beasts before you hear them. A thick, coppery stench, meat bile and something older, ancient, like the breath of a cave that's never seen light. The scent curls around the corridors of the amphitheater, clinging to your tunic, crawling down your throat. They're in their cages already. 3 lions, 1 bear, 2 wolves, all hungry, all restless. You don't feed them. You just escort the condemned. This is damnatio et bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Rome's favorite form of punishment when it wants to be loud, when it wants to show the audience not just that someone died, but that they were devoured. You wait in the holding cell. The prisoner is already stripped to his loincloth. His hands are bound, then unbound again. He's pacing in circles, mouthing something to himself. Not a prayer, just a rhythm. Something to hold on to. He knows what's coming. They all do. You hand him the short stick they always get. No blade, just wood, a token of pretense. The crowd loves it, the illusion of a fight. Like this is fair. You unlock the gate and step back. The guards push him forward. He hesitates. For a moment, you think he might break. But then the light hits his face, bright golden, endless, and the roar of the crowd pours in like a flood. He steps out. You close the gate behind him. Quirky tidbit. These executions were often scheduled for the lunch break during gladiator games called the Meridiani. The idea was that while citizens ate, they could digest with the satisfying sight of someone being eaten. The lions are first. They don't charge immediately. They circle. One growls deep and low. The crowd jeers. Someone throws a date pit at the prisoner. Another shouts, "Fight, coward!" You stand in the corridor and you listen. Not because you want to, because it's your job to make sure he doesn't escape. He doesn't. It's fast, mercifully. One pounce. A scream, then the tearing. You hear bones crack, and you don't flinch, because you've learned that flinching feeds the myth that you're still human, that you feel. The crowd cheers. Bread is tossed. A child near the front asks her father, "Will they feed more today?" He says, "If the Senate wills it, you collect the remains, or what's left of them. The bones go to the pit, an unmarked grave behind the arena. You've dumped so many bodies into that pit, you've stopped remembering their faces. You count them by teeth now, by what's missing. The sand is raked, blood absorbed. Within an hour, a new fight begins, over the same ground. You walk back to your quarters, still holding the gate keys. The guard nods at you. "You're good at this," he says. You don't answer, because that feels like a question. Later, you clean the stick the prisoner never used. Hang it back on the wall. It'll be handed to the next one. Quirky fact. Some prisoners chose to run toward the beasts, not out of bravery, but because they thought dying faster would deny Rome the full spectacle. Some succeeded. Some were mocked for it. You dream that night of lions, not their teeth, but their silence. The way they look at you, like they know, like they're just doing their job too. They bring the sand with them. Not all of it, of course. Just enough. A small cartload spread across the execution ground like a thin, mocking blanket. You watch the laborers rake it smooth, flat, circular, almost ceremonial. This isn't an arena. It's worse. Today, the condemned won't be lashed, won't be stabbed, won't even be tied to a cross. Today, they'll be buried, alive. Interment to the neck, a punishment reserved for traitors, oath breakers, or anyone who insulted the gods in a way the priests couldn't ignore. Quirky tidbit. This method of execution, often associated with sacrilege or severe dishonor, was sometimes performed near temples or crossroads, places of spiritual weight and public visibility. The idea wasn't just death. It was humiliation that could be witnessed. The woman today, a Vestal virgin, or rather, ex-Vestal, accused of breaking her vow of chastity. That means the sentence isn't just legal, it's religious. And that means you have to be precise. You're not allowed to touch her. That's part of the ritual. She's sacred, even in disgrace. So, your role is to prepare the pit, not the body. You dig it, deep shoulder, height circular, just wide enough for someone to stand upright. The earth is hard clay, crumbles when wet, clings to your hands in long, sticky strands. The smell is damp and sour. As you work, priests chant nearby. The woman is led in under heavy guard. She walks slowly. Her white robe is intact. Her face is blank. You don't meet her eyes. You never do. She's lowered into the pit by ropes, hands bound in front. No screams, no curses. Just the sound of fabric brushing stone. You watch as her feet disappear, then her knees, then her waist, until only her head remains. The priest gives a signal. You and 2 others begin packing earth back in, not with shovels with your hands. That's the tradition. The gods must see human hands carry out divine punishment. It's quiet. The crowd doesn't cheer for this one. They whisper, one handful after another, over the feet, over the legs, up the chest. Her breathing changes when you reach her ribs, short, quick, then slow again. Controlled. She doesn't cry. That's the part that will stay with you. She doesn't cry. You stop at the neck. That's where it ends. You step back. The priest recites a final line. You don't hear it, because you're already watching the sun. You always do, checking the shadow line to estimate how long it'll take. Sometimes they last an hour, sometimes 4. The body isn't retrieved. There's no burial, no marker, just a slight mound in the dirt and the echo of silence. You clean your hands in a basin of oil and vinegar. It doesn't work. You still smell the earth on your skin. Historians still debate whether this punishment was truly about the gods or about sending a message to women about power, obedience, and silence. You think it's both. You've seen too many exceptions to believe in fairness. Later, you sit by the gate and wait for the signal. A small bell. It rings just before sundown. You nod. The guards nod. No one says the words, but everyone knows what it means. You walk back to your quarters with dirt still under your fingernails. You don't clean it this time. Not yet. Not until it rains. Quirky fact. Some Roman citizens believed the ground could absorb sin when someone was buried alive. The idea was that the earth itself would judge. You're not sure if the earth judged her, but it held her, tighter than any rope you've ever tied. That night your dreams are shallow. You keep waking up, not from fear, but because your arms still feel heavy, like you're still holding the dirt. The arena is never truly empty. Even long after the crowds have gone, the wine has spilled, and the betting coins have been gathered into quiet, guilty purses. The air still hums with what it's witnessed. You walk across the blood-stained sand. Not quickly. There's no need. The last match ended hours ago, but your work, is only just beginning. Gladiators died today, and someone has to clean them up. That someone is you. You step into the arena pit, where the sand is darker, wetter, more honest. The bodies have been left where they fell, like broken props after a play. Limbs splayed, eyes open, weapons scattered like discarded truths. 3 men today, 2 Thracians, 1 Murmillo. You recognize one of the Thracians, young, cocky. He winked at you before the match. He's the one with his jaw torn off. You kneel, not to pray. To collect, you start with the weapons. 1 gladius, 1 Sika, 1 busted trident. The trident snapped mid-fight, still embedded in someone's ribs. You pull it free. The sound is unpleasant, You drag the bodies to the edge of the arena one by one, not out of reverence. There's no honor left here, but you do it carefully. The crowd may be gone, but you are still watched from the shadowed archways, where officials keep score, and from the stands where debt collectors wait to tally debts of the dead. Quirky tidbit, gladiators who died in the arena were often considered property either of the lanista who trained them or of sponsors who rented them for combat. Their corpses were returned, burned, or sold, depending on their value. Even in death, they were accounted for. The murmillo groans. Not dead. Not yet. You kneel again. His eyes flutter. One arm is bent the wrong way. His chest heaves in slow, shallow ripples. He tries to speak. You press a cloth to his mouth. He doesn't fight. You stay with him until he stops moving. Historians still argue whether mercy killings like this were common or just tolerated. There are no official scrolls for this part, just you and your memory, and the red cloth you keep in your belt pouch, washed, reworn, never clean. You haul the bodies to the corpse gate, a narrow tunnel beneath the arena, slick with old blood. You've walked it hundreds of times. The floor knows your boots. The walls know your shoulder. There, you hand the bodies over to the carcass men. Yes, that's what they're called. They take the corpses, strip them, weigh them, log the details. They work with the efficiency of butchers because they are. Anything of value is kept. Even the teeth sometimes. You don't watch that part. You head back into the arena with a rake. Because before the next fight, the sand must be flat, clean at least visually. The surface lies. It always lies. Underneath there's a foot of soaked earth and bone fragments. Some say if you dig deep enough you can find finger bones from the Republic days. You believe it. Quirky fact arena sand was often treated with crushed shells or ground chalk to mask the smell of blood and reduce slipping. But when it rained, everything rose to the surface like guilt with bad timing. You rake until your arms ache. Then you rake some more. When the sun begins to set, you gather your tools. Someone has left a pitcher of water and a half loaf of barley bread on the stone bench. You sit. You eat. You drink. You don't look at the stain near your foot. That one won't rake out. That's where the Thracian with no jaw landed. He's gone now. But something in the sand remembers. The scroll is sealed with wax, red wax, thick and deliberate. It smells faintly of cedar and ambition. You unroll it slowly, even though you already know what it says. The governor's mark is unmistakable, and the wording is exact legal, yet theatrical. Let it be known that the condemned, having spoken ill of the emperor in the presence of citizens and guests, shall be executed publicly, and their body displayed in effigy to remind all who pass of the cost of disloyalty. You look up from the scroll. The prisoner is chained to the wall, thin, pale, a scholar maybe. His fingers are ink-stained. He doesn't speak. just stares at a spot on the ground as if trying to find a crack in the marble big enough to crawl into. He called the emperor a coward in a tavern during a toast, drunk, and someone probably poorer and more opportunistic overheard. Reported it. Now he's yours. But this isn't a typical execution. No sword, no lions. This is symbolic death, a message, which means props, timing audience. You've done this before. You begin by building the scaffold. It goes up outside the Senate, steps tall, narrow, and impossible to ignore. Rope-bound beams, painted red with vermilion. You mount a wooden effigy at the top, a crude replica of the condemned, carved by the same artisans who build festival floats. Quirky tidbit. Romans often used wooden mannequins in executions meant more for display than death. In some cases, the actual execution took place quietly elsewhere, and the effigy received the public punishment. But today, the man will die beneath the puppet made in his image. The condemned is dressed in purple, a tattered toga meant to mock imperial regalia. You place a tin circlet on his head. His wrists are bound in silver-painted cords. It's all part of the spectacle. A mock Caesar, ready for mock execution. You escort him through the streets. People gather. Some laugh. Some look away. Some spit. He says nothing. Not out of defiance, but because at this point he knows anything he says becomes part of the play. And the play is rigged. At the base of the scaffold, you read the charges aloud. You keep your voice steady. You've done this before. Sedition, blasphemy, disloyalty to the emperor. The final line always feels like a whisper, even though you shout it. Let his name be unspoken, henceforth. And then you strike, not hard, just enough. A quick blow to the back of the neck, followed by a drop. The body slumps. The crowd sighs, some satisfied, some weary. But it's not over. You hoist the body onto the scaffold, binding it in place beneath the effigy. A man and his puppet, side by side. Both silenced. Historians still argue whether these executions were truly about punishing sedition or about shaping collective memory. Was the man dangerous or just unlucky? Was the effigy meant to scare rebels or amuse senators? You don't debate that anymore. You just secure the ropes. When you're done, the puppet's arms are arranged in a mock imperial pose, one hand raised in eternal decree, the other clutching a wooden scroll. It's supposed to be ironic. You just think it's heavy. Later that evening, you're tasked with burning the body. Not the effigy that stays for a week, but the man he's tossed into the cremation pit outside the city wall. No ceremony, just smoke, just ash. You clean your hands with wine-soaked cloth and stare at the stars. Quirky fact. The phrase damnatio memoriae refers to the Roman practice of erasing someone's name from history. Statues destroyed, inscriptions scratched out. But people remembered anyway, quietly, stubbornly, like scars. That night, a child asks you why the puppet wore purple. You tell them so we wouldn't forget who he wasn't. They don't understand, but they nod anyway. And you walk home through alleys that no longer feel quiet. You're up before dawn, not because of duty, but because the stench would have woken you anyway. Today the job is crucifixion. You know it from the tools laid out beside your quarters, long iron nails, bundles of rope, rough-hewn wooden beams, and a hammer so heavy it makes your wrist ache just looking at it. The condemned are already shackled in the lower cells. 3 of them, robbers, you think, or rebels, or both. The paperwork never says anything useful, just non-citizen and not worth trial. You drink a sip of sour wine and stretch your fingers. You'll need all your strength today. Crucifixion isn't efficient. That's not the point. It's not about speed. It's about visibility, about duration. You help load the beams onto the ox cart. One of them slips and crushes your boot. You don't yelp. That would invite laughter from the guards. Instead, you grit your teeth and curse the Romans' obsession with long, slow death. The site is a mile outside the city wall, a hilltop bare exposed. On windy days, the smell travels all the way to the market. They call it the skull place. And not metaphorically. Quirky tidbit archaeologists have found hilltops across the empire with hundreds of buried heel bones each, with nail holes straight through them. Not all sites were marked. Most weren't. They didn't need to be. Everyone knew. You unload the beams first, then the crossbars. You dig the post holes yourself, 3 feet deep, spaced unevenly. Because the land is sloped, doesn't matter. Gravity does the rest. Then come the prisoners. They're half carried, half dragged. You lash the first man's wrists to the crossbeam. He screams. They all do. You hammer anyway. The first nail takes 2 swings. The second 4. Blood arcs across your forearm. Hot. Thin. You wipe it off with your elbow. No one offers help. They never do. The second man tries to fight. Bites a guard. Breaks his own finger in the scuffle. So you tie him tighter. Nail him faster. He shrieks until his voice breaks into a wheeze. The third just stares at the clouds. You wonder what he sees. When the beams are ready, you and the others lift them into place. The posts stand waiting ugly and indifferent. You heave the crossbars up, 1, then 2, then 3, sliding them into grooves, securing them with wedges. The bodies dangle, twitch, settle. You wait for the quiet. It always comes. Sometimes minutes, sometimes hours. Today it comes fast. The wind picks up. Flies circle before the sun even peaks. You sit in the shade and drink the rest of your wine. A child wanders by holding a fig, points at the men and says, "Are they asleep?" You say nothing, because you don't want to lie. Historians still argue over the mechanics of Roman crucifixion, whether the nails went through wrists or hands, whether the feet were crossed or nailed separately. You've done all the versions. You think the Romans just did whatever hurt more. By midday, the crows come. They perch on the beams. Wait. Watch. One of the men is still breathing. His eyes find yours. You look away. Quirky fact. Executioners were sometimes given the clothes of the condemned as payment. That means half the tunics in your wardrobe once belonged to dead men. You don't wear them, but you keep them. You don't know why. By dusk, 2 of them are gone. The third still breathes, but barely. The guards ask if they should break his legs, speed things up. You nod. They use clubs. You turn away. Because you can bear the screams, but not the silence that follows. That silence lingers long after the posts are empty, long after the bones are gone and the hill is just a hill again. That's what stays with you. Not the nails, not the blood, but the wind. Whistling through the wood, like it remembers. You stand at the edge of the Tiber, watching a barge drift in slow circles. It's weighted just enough to keep the body submerged almost. But the tide is playing tricks today, and you catch a glimpse of flesh, gray, swollen, staring. You nod to the man beside you. He wades in, tugs the rope hauls the corpse to shore. It takes 3 men to lift it. This one's senatorial. Or was. You can tell by the ring still on his finger, absurdly pristine against bloated knuckles. The face is too ruined to recognize. But the sandals are custom, the robe silk, the message is clear. Dissent will not float. You don't ask who he was. You just catalog him. That's your new task. Not killing, not burying, recording. You work now in the Archivum Suppliciorum, a chamber beneath the Forum, where the state keeps records of death, like ledgers of grain. You didn't ask for the transfer. You were moved. Someone decided your skills would be better used filing executions than performing them. You're not sure if that's a promotion or punishment. Quirky tidbit. The Romans were meticulous bureaucrats when it came to execution. Every official, death citizen, or slave noble or rebel was recorded by scribes under oath. Even the method time and witnesses were preserved on wax tablets or scrolls. You open the register. Date Secundus of March. Location Tiber River, East Key. Cause blunt trauma, back of skull. Marks of strangulation. Ligature present. No sign of resistance, likely unconscious, before immersion. You dip your stylus and write in careful, even lines. Across the room, another scribe logs a crucifixion from Gaul. He's younger, too precise. He still writes with moral judgment in his posture. He'll lose that soon. The walls are lined with scrolls bone-white crisp, row upon row of lives ended and sealed. You sometimes wonder if anyone reads them, or if they're just a form of forgetting disguised as memory. Historians still argue whether these execution records were meant to provide legal transparency or merely simulate justice. After all, most of the names belong to the poor, the nameless, the inconvenient. You log another, this one a slave who ran, caught, whipped, crucified. You pause at the description, attempted to escape to see dying mother. You consider omitting it, then decide to leave it in. No one will read it anyway. Later, you prepare for an audit, inspecting the seals, checking wax color, matching blood tags with entries. Every execution, however brutal, must be traceable. There is beauty in that, in a grim way, but only from a distance. Quirky fact: some executioners became scribes in retirement, tasked with recording the very punishments they once enacted. This was seen as a form of penance or employment insurance. You wonder which one this is for you. When the sun sets, you walk through the upper forum. A group of students recites Virgil nearby. You hear the line, "Forsan et haex olim memenisse juvabit." Perhaps someday it will be pleasing to remember even these things. You doubt it, but you keep walking. You wake to shouting, not panicked official, the kind of barking that only comes from soldiers who enjoy being obeyed. There's a fire, not a real one, a symbolic one. The temple needs a pyre built, and today's sacrifice isn't animal or wine. It's a traitor's scroll. You drag yourself out of your cot, pull on your belt, and follow the orders uphill. The sky is gray, not stormy, just indifferent, like it doesn't care what burns today. The scroll arrives in a guarded chest, bound in bronze, carried by two sweating men who walk like they're hauling a god. You peek inside. It's parchment, ordinary, flecked with wax and age, but the ink, treasonous. Apparently it's a banned treatise on land reform, written by a senator who now resides in a ditch outside Capua. They want it burned on the altar of Ceres as a message to those who think grain should be free. Quirky tidbit: in Rome, ideas could be executed too. Public burnings of books, scrolls, and tablets were common. Sometimes the authors were executed after their works. Sometimes they disappeared, first leaving their words as the final crime. You build the pyre by the temple steps, not with dry wood, but oiled pine branches, thick smoke, lots of crackle. Spectacle. A priest arrives flanked by two boys holding bowls of salt. You bow. Not from reverence, just habit, like scratching an itch you don't feel. The scroll is unrolled briefly for the crowd. People whisper. No one speaks aloud what's written. That's the rule. Repeating it is a crime, even under your breath. Then the priest nods. You toss it in. It catches instantly. Yellow flame, black ash, a hiss that sounds like a curse. A woman claps once. A soldier glares. No one else moves. Historians still argue whether Roman censorship was about controlling ideology or simply suppressing unrest. But scrolls burn quickly. The reasons behind them tend to smolder. You rake the ash into a ceremonial trench. You're given a coin. One coin. As payment. No one thanks you. No one ever does. Later that day, you're assigned a prisoner escort. A philosopher from Hispania brought in chains. His crime, improper use of metaphors involving Jupiter. He grins the whole time. You don't ask why. You don't want to know if the joke was actually good. At sunset, you visit the registry again. Log the fire. List the scroll. File the coin. That's what keeps the empire running. Not valor, not law, but ledgers. You sleep uneasily that night. Dream of parchment curling into flame letters, twisting midair, trying to spell their truth before the smoke takes them. You wake with ash in your throat. Quirky fact: in some cases, the ashes of burned books were buried with curses etched into clay tablets placed beneath them, just in case the ideas tried to come back. You think that's excessive, but not entirely unreasonable. Not here. You're called to the amphitheater at dawn, not for lions, not for swords, but for drama. The condemned is already there, chained to a column, blindfolded, trembling in the half-light. You recognize the type, not a rebel, not a soldier, not even a thief. A prop maker, apparently. Guilty of mocking a noble family during a festival parade. Now he's the main attraction in today's morality execution. You sigh. Because this one's a show. A full theater of death where the audience expects not just punishment, but narrative. Quirky tidbit. Romans invented what modern scholars call thematic executions, where condemned criminals were forced to reenact mythological deaths, always with a twist: they didn't survive. You're given a script. Yes, a script. It says Act 1, Daedalus and Icarus. You blink. The man's crime was irreverent speech. His punishment: to play Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun. You help with the props. The wings are wax-dipped reeds attached to a crude harness. The amphitheater crew has rigged a wooden ramp leading to a platform about 20 feet high, dangerous, but not impossible. At the end of the jump, there's no net, just sand and spears. You meet his eyes while tightening the straps. He knows what's coming, but he nods, quietly. You think that's brave, or stupid. You're not sure anymore. The crowd is massive today. The magistrate enters in ceremonial robes, waves to the benches, and declares, "Let myth punish the insolent." Trumpets sound. The man is brought to the ramp. He climbs awkwardly, the wings flapping behind him like broken shutters. At the top, he pauses, raises his arms, and jumps. Historians still argue whether the crowd believed in these plays or simply enjoyed the irony. But the result is always the same. He lands hard. Back breaks. Legs twist. He's still breathing, barely. You step forward. You're the sun. That's your role in this particular play. You strike once with a bronze rod, painted gold, theatrical, but heavy. His body stills. The audience cheers, not wildly, just enough, like applauding a good meal or a well-told joke. Quirky fact: in some recorded cases, condemned criminals were dressed as Hercules and forced to fight real animals. Sometimes they won, briefly. Sometimes the crowd turned against the producers for a bad performance. You help clear the stage, drag the wings off, pack the sand over the blood. Later, at the Forum, you pass a vendor selling Icarus figs, tiny sweets, shaped like falling boys. The city forgets fast. That night, someone leaves a scroll in your chamber. No signature, just 2 lines. If Rome is the stage who plays the hangman, you burn it. No reason, just habit. You're posted at the docks this week, not for fishing, not for transport, for inspection. A fleet from Alexandria has arrived, grain ships, mostly, but with them come crates, barrels, and bodies, because the empire doesn't just import goods, it imports executions. You meet the harbor master at dawn. He's already sweating, barking at slaves to unload faster. A scroll in his hand lists the cargo of consequence: 10 prisoners sentenced abroad, returned to Rome for displayable punishment. You hate that phrase. Displayable, like they're furniture or produce. The first crate opens with a creak and a smell that reminds you of vinegar and burnt fish. Inside, a man barely alive, shackled, branded. His left ear is missing. His right eye looks at you like it's trying to fall out. You check the scroll. Corinthian smuggler, survived boiling oil. Proceed with flaying. You sigh. Flaying requires preparation, not just the tools, obsidian knives, oil hot towels, but also a crowd. This isn't punishment, it's performance art. Quirky tidbit: Romans reserved flaying for traitors, but occasionally used it for foreigners who had insulted Roman gods. The act was performed slowly, section by section, often beginning with the back or face, depending on the message. You escort the man to the execution grounds behind the Temple of Mars. It's cleaner there, easier to dispose of runoff. 2 boys prepare the benches. You check the weather: overcast. Good. Sun makes the skin stick too fast. The smuggler never begs, just breathes in shallow, resigned wheezes. You sharpen your blade. The priest gives a nod. You begin. The first cut is always the cleanest, like slicing through fruit you don't want to eat. The skin peels back in strips. You work carefully, not out of compassion, but because a sloppy flay leads to angry magistrates. And nothing is worse than a complaint after a public execution. Historians still argue whether these displays were meant to deter crime or simply affirm Roman superiority over lesser peoples. You think it's neither. You think it's habit. Somewhere along the way, they forgot why. The second man is easier, a thief from Gaul. His punishment: sewing into a sack with a dog and a monkey. Yes, you read that right. The poena culae. You gather the animals from the cages behind the courthouse. The monkey shrieks. The dog snarls. The man vomits. You prepare the sack. Quirky fact: the poena culae was traditionally used for parricides, those who killed a parent. The condemned was sewn into a sack with a rooster, a monkey, a dog, and a snake, then thrown into the Tiber. The chaos of the animals was part of the sentence. You couldn't find a rooster today, No one complains. You shove them in one after another, then stitch the sack closed. The whole thing writhes like a breathing basket. Then you roll it off the dock. The splash is soft. You listen. 30 seconds later, it stops moving. The harbor quiets again. Later, you fill out the report. Flaying completed. Audience 34. Poena Coulée executed. River depth sufficient. Scroll signed, sealed, filed. You eat dinner beside a storage crate labeled Tools, Etruria. It smells like death and time. You don't mind. Not anymore. You sleep with your boots on, just in case. You've been summoned to the palace, not the marble dream of emperors and poets, but the side wing where administrative functions stew like old broth, thick with sweat ink and intrigue. Your task, interrogation. Not the loud, bloody kind. This one's quiet, controlled, elegant, even if you squint hard enough and ignore the screaming in the walls. You're escorted to the Domus Secreta, a suite beneath the Praetorian Guard barracks. The air here doesn't move. It presses in, like the walls are listening. Today's prisoner is a noble, sort of. A disgraced astrologer, once favored by a senator's wife. His charts were too accurate, apparently. He predicted her husband's death a week too early. Then the husband died. Now he's here, stripped of his robes, eyes ringed dark, still smelling faintly of cinnamon oil and pride. You sit across from him. A scribe stands nearby, tablet ready. You're not told what to ask, but the goal is always the same. Who else knows you offer water first? It's lukewarm metallic. He takes it. His hands shake just enough to satisfy you. You begin. Gentle questions. Where did he study? What signs did he see? Who paid him? Then you ask the only one that matters. Did you share the prediction? He hesitates. That's enough. The scribe writes something before you even respond. Quirky tidbit. In late imperial Rome, astrologers were both adored and feared. Some were invited to imperial courts. Others were publicly executed for divination without sanction. Prediction was treason if it came too close to truth. You press further. He insists he only told the wife. You press again. He says nothing. You glance at the guard. A small nod. They bring in the coals. Hot iron balls resting in a bronze pan. Not to brand. Not yet. Just to hold. You set one gently on the table in front of him. Say nothing. Wait. Eventually, he speaks. A name. Two more. You act unimpressed. He tries to offer more, but it's too late. His fate was sealed before he opened his mouth. Historians still argue whether Roman interrogations were designed to find truth or fabricated. You don't argue. You just record. You escort him back to his cell. His feet drag. He asks quietly if the stars still matter. You don't answer. Not because you don't know, but because you do. Later, the name he gave is summoned. Another interrogation, another hot iron. You lose track of how many. Quirky fact. Some Roman officials trained for years in face reading the belief that guilt could be seen in the twitch of a brow, the narrowing of an eye. Entire cases were decided on ocular suspicion. You've seen faces twist in pain, in anger, in guilt. They all look the same now. At night you rub ointment on your own hands. The heat from the coals lingers, even through gloves. You dream of stars collapsing, not from prophecy, just exhaustion. You're reassigned to the provinces, not for rest, not for exile, for demonstration. Apparently the outposts need a reminder of Roman discipline, and nothing sends a message like an executioner arriving unannounced with scrolls, a cloak, and a crate of iron tools. Your destination is a small military settlement in Dacia, cold, muddy, and suspiciously cheerful until they see your insignia. Then doors close, children vanish, and the magistrate suddenly finds you lodging. You meet with the local decurion, a man named Marius, whose armor is too clean and whose smile is too wide. He offers you bread oil and an unspoken apology because he knows why you're here. A week ago, 3 legionaries assaulted a merchant girl from the next village. The village retaliated, burned a supply cart, cursed the soldiers, and stopped selling grain. Now Rome wants balance. Your job: make the punishment memorable. Quirky tidbit. In provincial zones, Rome used ritual executions not only to enforce law, but to stage unity. Sometimes the victims were locals, sometimes Roman soldiers. Justice wasn't about fairness, it was about optics. The girl is gone, her family too. The soldiers still here. You read the scroll, guilty of violation and breach of imperial peace. To be bound, scourged, and exposed. Not crucified, not beheaded, exposed. Which means left tied to a post outside the gates, naked, overnight. If they survive, they're released dishonorably. If not, no one mourns. You wonder who writes these fates. You prepare the site. 2 wooden beams, no nails, just ropes. The townspeople are invited, quietly. At dusk, the 3 soldiers are dragged out. One weeps, one curses, one is already drunk or pretending. You strip them slowly, not to shame them, but to set the mood. This is a ritual. Remember, historians still argue whether Roman provincial punishments were more about theater than deterrence. But no one forgets a man left to freeze under moonlight. The crowd watches. Some whisper, some spit. You tie the wrists high, let the toes barely touch the earth. Then you wait, all night. You doze in a cart nearby, blanket wrapped around your knees. Just before sunrise, one of them dies. Tongue swollen, skin purple. The other 2 beg. You untie them at dawn. Their legs collapse. One vomits. The crowd nods, satisfied. Balance for now. You write the report by lamplight. Justice performed. Crowd attendance 47. Local grain trade resumed. Quirky fact: Rome had no standard justice across the empire. Punishments could vary wildly depending on location, mood, or who was watching. You board your horse the next day. The road is long. You don't look back, but you hear the sound of villagers sweeping the ground as if cleaning the memory. Back in Rome, they ask for details. You hand over the scroll. No one reads it. They stamp it, file it, and ask you where you'll go next. You shrug. Executioners don't choose. They just arrive. You're back in Rome, but not for long. There's been a riot in the Suburra district. Again, bread shortages, price spikes. Someone slapped a tax collector. Someone else slapped the man who slapped the tax collector. Now, there's blood in the fountains and a crowd that won't go home. And what does Rome do when crowds swell? It makes examples. Your orders are specific. Seize 3 men of noticeable presence and ensure the execution is memorable enough to cancel lunch plans. You head into the slums with 6 guards, a magistrate, and a scroll that might as well say, "We choose violence." It doesn't take long. You spot a soapbox speaker calling for grain equity. He's theatrical, beard perfectly scruffy, arms raised like a tragic hero. You pick him first. The second is quieter, just unlucky. Wrong place, wrong tunic. You point. The third spits at your feet, so you take his teeth first. Quirky tidbit. In riot control, Rome often arrested figureheads regardless of guilt. The theory was simple. Decapitate the crowd. It didn't always work. Sometimes the head was replaced before you got back to headquarters. You marched them to the field of Mars. Not the Forum, too sacred. Not the Colosseum, too expensive. The field is perfect, open, public, and loud. Today's sentence: scourging, branding, and post-exposure. Not glamorous, but visceral. You tie the men to stakes in a triangle, facing outward, so each can watch the others scream. You use the flagrum, a whip with bone and lead woven into its cords. It doesn't slice skin. It shreds it like butter through canvas. The crowd grows. Some throw olives. Some throw prayers. A mother holds her child high like it's educational. Historians still argue whether these public punishments prevented uprisings or simply fertilized the next one. You know it's both. One man passes out. You pour vinegar on his back. He wakes up screaming. You brand each on the chest a capital R for rioter. It will never heal properly. Quirky fact: brands weren't just physical, they became legal statuses. A branded man lost rights, couldn't testify, couldn't marry a Roman citizen, couldn't enter temples. You leave them tied for 2 more hours. By noon, their breath hitches. One starts laughing, not sane laughter, just release. At sundown, the guards cut them down. You walk home slowly. The sky is pink, and for once, no one makes eye contact. That night, a senator gives a speech thanking the gods for swift and fair Roman justice. You listen from a rooftop, nearby, eating a date. It tastes like ash and honey. Your fingers still smell like blood. You don't bother washing them. The scrolls are already stacked for tomorrow. 3 more names, 3 more crowds. Justice in Rome is a performance. And you never miss your cue. You're summoned to the hills this time, not for executions, for training. Yes, apparently Rome now trains executioners, like a guild, like any other trade. You've been ordered to instruct 4 young men fresh from auxiliary service on the ethics and efficiency of judicial punishment. You almost laugh, but you don't. Because you're the only one who knows how to remove a head in one stroke without hitting the jaw first. You meet them in a courtyard behind the old guardhouse. Sunlight already harsh flies dancing over the training dummies. They stand straight, but you can see the twitch in their fingers. One has never touched a blade before. Another keeps glancing toward the exit. You start with the tools, not just blades, ropes, nails, weights, gags, oil, vinegar, salt cloth, stakes, brands. You line them up like a surgeon laying out instruments. Then you start with the hands. How to hold the blade, how to tie a clean knot, how to make the first cut small so the audience leans in. Quirky tidbit, Roman executioners weren't just enforcers, they were craftsmen. Some became minor celebrities. One man in Nero's court was known for his signature spin. Before a beheading, he got applause. You walk them through scenarios. What to do if a neck is too thick. What to do if a man won't scream when he's supposed to. How to read the crowd and adjust. Yes, adjust. Sometimes you slow down to build tension. Sometimes you go fast to calm a crowd. Sometimes you make eye contact because it makes people remember. You give them dummies at first, then pigs, then prisoners. One young man vomits behind the barracks. Another apologizes to a corpse. You nod. That's good. Better to feel it now than freeze during a sentence. Historians still argue whether executioners were feared or pitied. You tell your students not to worry about either. You're not the sword you say. You're the hand that holds it. The day ends with silence. They look at the ground. You hand each a scroll. Inside is the oath of the blade, a made-up tradition you created years ago just to give them something to hold on to when the blood gets under their fingernails. Quirky fact: no official Roman manual on execution techniques survives, but scholars have reconstructed methods from tomb engravings, supply lists, and the spacing of blood gutters in amphitheaters. You return to your quarters late. The sun's nearly down. One of the students knocks quietly, holding a jar of wine. He asks if the dreams ever stop. You lie. Say yes. He nods like he believes you. You both drink. The wine tastes of iron and plum. He falls asleep on the bench. You stay up polishing the blades. They never truly shine. But that's not the point. Tomorrow they'll execute a thief, and you'll stand behind them, not to help, just to see if they tremble. It's your final assignment of the year, or at least that's what they tell you. There's a ceremony in the forum, a grand one. Senators in white, laurel wreaths, drums, perfume thick in the air like perfumed deceit. It's not a punishment, not officially. It's an execution disguised as celebration, the emperor's birthday games, where Justice is dressed in ribbons, and blood is only shed on schedule. You arrive before dawn. The arena is already humming. Gladiators stretch. Musicians tune. Vendors hang baskets of dates and figs, as if that'll make the crowd forget what's about to happen. Your job one. Featured execution. Midday slot. High sun. Full stands. They've chosen a man convicted of impersonating a priest. A serious offense in any province, but here in Rome, it's practically heresy. He's already in costume. White robes, purple sash, laurel crown. They want him to look the part. So the fall is steeper. Quirky tidbit Roman executions at public games were often dramatized. Condemned criminals would be dressed as mythological figures and executed in scenes that mimicked ancient stories. Orpheus devoured by beasts, Icarus falling, Prometheus chained. Today's myth, the death of Remus. Yes, that Remus, brother of Rome's founder. They're going to stage a reenactment. Have your prisoner leap the symbolic wall and then be killed for his hubris. You rehearse the scene. He runs, he leaps, you stand behind the wall. The crowd gasps. You draw your blade. You strike. Blood arcs. The crowd cheers. The drums resume. You pull him off stage. Someone throws you a towel. You wave. The emperor nods from his balcony. Historians still argue whether these theatrical killings blurred the line between justice and entertainment, or erased it entirely. You think it's gone, long gone. Later, you wash your hands in a silver basin. The water turns pink. A girl nearby offers you honeyed wine. You decline. You walk past the cages of beasts, lions, bears, ostriches. One lion watches you like it understands. You nod to it. Then you leave. Back through the corridors of stone, out into the city's tangled streets. It's quieter now. The crowds are dispersing. The vendors are counting coins. You pass a beggar with no tongue. You pass a child pretending to be a judge. You pass your own shadow, long and lean and soaked in silence. And as you reach your apartment 3 floors up, cracked tiles, a candle you forgot to blow out, you realize you've become part of Rome's rhythm, not its history, its heartbeat. Every punishment, every cheer, every sharpened edge. You were there. You don't sleep that night, but you rest. You deserve at least that. The crowd is gone now, the arena empty, the tools cleaned and tucked away. Only the sand remembers what happened. And even that will be swept by morning. You sit by a small window, high above the city, where the breeze is gentle, and the roofs stretch like faded mosaics beneath the moon. Your hands are still, your breath quiet. Tonight there are no orders, no scrolls, no blood on your sleeves, just the soft hum of Rome settling into sleep, dogs barking in the distance, a fountain trickling 2 streets down, and the occasional clink of wine cups as neighbors say goodnight. The stars above you look like they always do, indifferent, ancient, and slow to blink. You lean back against the wall, eyes half closed. Whatever tomorrow brings, beast blade or bureaucracy, you'll face it. Not with pride, not with fear, just with routine, the way Romans always do. Because someone must carry the weight. Someone must remember how sharp things get. But not now. Now is for stillness, for quiet, for the slow rhythm of breath and thought and sleep. And as the city exhales around you and the shadows grow longer, you finally let go. Let yourself be carried gently into the dark, into dreams untouched by empire.